There is no record of Jews in England before the Norman conquest in 1066, but we know that Jews from Rouen arrived at the command of William the Conqueror to introduce a network of credit and trading links between his new English lands and his French ones. His son, William Rufus, who succeeded him, was wildly unpopular with Norman as well as Anglo-Saxon subjects, but he did value the Jews, and he prevented the kind of Jewish massacres that had taken place across Europe at the time of the First Crusade in 1096. On the death of Rufus in 1100, his brother Henry I took the throne. He continued a favourable Norman policy towards the Jews, giving privileges of liberty which fostered a 35-year period of Jewish prosperity. During King Stephen's reign, an English as opposed to a London Jewry emerged. Stephen had a new policy towards other previously closely defended royal monopolies such as mints. He allowed new mints to open all over south and central England, and the Jewish population was not slow to take advantage of this new situation. And there is evidence of Jews living in many of the important trading centres by the middle of the 1140s. In 1146, the Second Crusade led to further but smaller attacks, but Stephen protected Jews and saved their lives and their property. Under Henry II, there was enormous economic expansion, and there was plenty of demand for credit, and major Jewish fortunes were made in London, Oxford, Bristol and other towns. When Aaron of Lincoln died in 1186, he was so wealthy, a separate exchequer was set up just to evaluate the extent of his wealth for the purposes of death duties, one of the Crown's major ways of capitalising on the prosperity of its Jews. On the death of Henry II, his son Richard I, Richard the Lionheart, became king and was crowned on September 3rd, 1189. The day turned out to be a disaster for the Jews. Jews were barred from the ceremony, but Jewish dignitaries who dared to turn up and showed up bearing gifts were stripped, whipped and banished from the court. As they fled, rumours spread in London that the new king detested the infidels and meant to kill them all, and mayhem ensued. The Jews of London were plundered and murdered, their houses were burnt down, and no one was held accountable. As reports of this slaughter circulated, attacks on Jews spread to other English cities. The most notorious of these taking place on March the 16th, 1190, in York. Rioting began with a mob attempting to burn down Jewish homes. The Jews were officially protected by the king and sought protection in the royal castle, barricading themselves in. The rioters, meanwhile, were egged on by members of the local gentry. These men saw the riots as an opportunity to wipe out the extensive debts they owed the Jewish moneylenders. Indeed, after the massacre, they proceeded to burn the records of their debts held in the minster, so absolving themselves for repayment to the king, who would require the property and debts owed to the murdered Jews. The Jews in the keep, fearing treachery, locked out the royal constable, who then demanded the castle be captured by force, and a group of knights arrived to attack the castle. Seeing no way out, most of the Jews chose to commit suicide in the keep. After killing their wives and children, they set fire to the wooden keep and killed themselves. The Clifford's Tower, which we now see, was built on the charred ruins of the old keep some 40 years later. Lincoln was another city which had an important Jewish community at this time. Their wealth could be seen by the fact that they could build their houses in stone rather than wood. And some of these buildings, known as Jew's House and Jew's Court, are still standing today. Their leader, a man called Aaron, was reputed to be the richest man in the country, even richer than the king himself. He provided funds for 9 monasteries in the area, as well as for the splendid Bishop's Palace attached to the cathedral. In 1185, the cathedral suffered substantial damage due to an earthquake. Its rebuilding coincided with the arrival of a new bishop, Hugh of Avalon, an enlightened and spiritual man who actively protected Jews, combating the ignorance and prejudices of his age. He did not merely advocate being kind to Jews, but he risked his life to do so. For example, in 1190, in the dramatic incident in Northampton, he faced down a mob intent of mischief and mayhem against the Jewish community. And in the same year, in Lincoln, he helped save the community from crusaders when the community took refuge in the castle, making sure they didn't suffer the same fate as those in York. The cathedral itself is a magnificent example of Gothic cathedral architecture. and its links to the Jewish community are evidenced in artworks depicting Judaism and drawing on stories from the Jewish tradition. There are many examples of this around the cathedral, particularly on the west front. The Bishop's Eye is one of two magnificent circular stained glass windows to be found in the cathedral. Hugh was a young lad of about 9 years old, who was out playing with friends, but who went missing. A few days later, his body was found at the bottom of a well in the house of a Jewish man called Copin, or maybe Jopin. The man was arrested, and in no time at all, a dreadful tale of ritual murder and a blood libel, where it believed Christian children were tortured and killed in Jewish rituals, was woven around the tragedy of the little boy's death. There were attempts to make the little boy a martyr and a saint, and his tomb is in the cathedral here. He is known as Little St. Hugh, but he was never officially canonised. However, what makes this worse from the Jewish perspective is that on this occasion, the king took a personal interest in the aftermath of the event. The king was Henry III, and his main motivation for this seems to have been greed. 90 members of the Jewish congregation were shipped off to the Tower of London, and 18 of them were executed. These were the richest members of the congregation in the main, because the rule was that if anyone was convicted and executed, then all of their assets reverted back to the crown. Henry, as usual, was very short of money, and this was an ideal way of A, getting out of paying his debts, and B, availing himself of all the wealth of the Jewish population. However, if Henry III made things difficult for the Jewish population, then his son, Edward I, made things a whole lot worse. He became king in 1272 on the death of his father. In 1275, he issued the Statute of the Jewry, which deprived the Jews of a resort to usury, thus preventing them from earning any money at all under the conditions of life then existing in feudal England. Left with no means of sustaining themselves, some of the population resorted to coin clipping as a means of securing a precarious existence. As a consequence, in 1278, the whole of English Jewry was imprisoned, and no fewer than 293 Jews were executed in London. He then expelled all the Jews from Gascony, a province still then held by England, and when he returned from France in July 1290, he issued a decree ordering all Jews to leave England before All Saints' Day of that year. And they didn't return for over 350 years.